Hi everybody, it's Jay. This is a mini lecture on, as you see, basic paragraph organization. I'm going to start there we go, slideshow. I'm focusing on paragraphs because they're probably the most important organizational strategy that any writer can use in his or her writing. In a paragraph, this is probably not a definition that's all that new to you guys, but just for the sake of clarity, it's a group of sentences that's usually related by a main unifying idea. And a lot of the time, especially in academic writing, that idea appears as a topic sentence. It's often explicit, though not always. A paragraph does a number of things. It shows key shifts in logical or narrative or descriptive progression. In other words, if you're using a paragraph break, whether it's an indentation or an extra space, what it signals to a reader is that you're shifting your focus from one logical part of an argument to another, or from one piece of narrative to another, or from one part of a description to another. But a paragraph also provides visual breaks and can enhance overall visual design. I said in class that it's really important as a first pass at reading anything to just get a visual sense of it, just to take kind of a mental snapshot, and paragraphs can help you do that. It's a way to help your readers take a break, even a really quick one. If they're reading through a really, really long paragraph, then they can get really tired. And so even if you're not making a major logical shift in your writing, it can be a good idea to put in a paragraph break just to signal that it's time to take a visual break. And they're also really useful for emphasis, especially if they're very short. A lot of people hear that paragraphs have to be a certain number of sentences. I think I learned that when I was in elementary school or middle school that paragraphs have to be at least 3 sentences long. That's absolutely not true. A paragraph can be a single sentence. It's not a problem. It's not very common in academic writing, but it's common in a lot of other kinds of writing, and it can really emphasize things for your reader. It can call attention to the paragraph. Here are what a lot of paragraphs do. Here are some conventional characteristics. First of all, paragraphs are often unified. That means a paragraph's sentences are all relevant to the main idea. So if you express a main idea, a paragraph is considered unified if all of the sentences in the paragraph support that main idea. Paragraphs are also, they tend to be cohesive. That is to say that the sentences connect to one another, often through signposts, transition words like therefore and consequently and furthermore, but also more mundane connecting words like and, but, or, nor, stuff like that. We'll get more into the specifics of cohesion later on in the semester, but for now it's important just to note that paragraphs have sentences that somehow connect to one another. And paragraphs are also usually well developed. That means a couple of things. First of all, as I mentioned in class, that there is usually a balance of whatever your original material is and whatever is supporting your original claim. So there's a balance of your words and someone else's words. And then in a paragraph that isn't necessarily one that has to do with supporting an argument, there's at the very least adequate examples. So if you are, just kind of stating a main idea, you want to make sure that you provide enough examples, enough detail in the paragraph that your reader gets a clear idea concretely of what it is you're trying to say or write more accurately. Here are some common organizational schemes for paragraphs, and this is not an exhaustive list, but you're going to probably run into one or more of these pretty commonly in academic writing and narrative writing, formal and informal writing. General to specific, so you start big and you end at like some really small level of detail, comparatively small anyway. That organizational scheme is especially useful in descriptive writing and in some analytical writing. There's also a climactic arrangement, and that means using a rhetorical climax. So you build up to the most important point. Maybe that's at the very end of the paragraph. It's often the case, especially in English language writing, that readers tend to remember what they read last. So if you know that, it can lead to a good strategy. You put your most compelling information, your most compelling detail at the end of a paragraph. Paragraphs can also be spatially organized so that you in the course of describing something, you move from left to right, from top to bottom. Those are the 2 most common spatial organizational patterns in English, left to right, top to bottom, and I think that's because when we read in English, we read from left to right and from top to bottom, so that's just kind of become conventional. And then chronological, that's probably the most intuitive paragraph arrangement. We believe anyway that we live through time in a linear fashion, and so if we organize paragraphs that way, it kind of makes sense to us. Here's some example paragraphs over the next several slides, and I hope you really like my incredibly elaborate presentation here with the really awesome color scheme. If you've got suggestions for different colors, feel free to let me know. So this paragraph begins with a general statement. Bicycles have long been popular as recreational equipment. They don't have a solid reputation in the U.S. as transportation devices, but you see that transition word. And by the way, it's perfectly fine to start a sentence with but or and. Teachers may have told you you can't, but it's perfectly fine to do that. You may find that some instructors, that's a pet peeve for them, but if it is for them, then don't do it. But most of the time, it's perfectly fine. But in a number of large cities, times are changing. And then what you see are several sentences that provide examples of what it is that I mean. New York, Minneapolis, Portland, Salt Lake City. So general statement at the beginning, specific examples toward the end. And feel free to pause this video at any point to read through these more, slowly. Climactic, so building up to something. I had a cold. It wasn't the kind of cold that prompted friends to remark, "Ooh, that sounds bad." This was the kind of cold that made strangers on the bus wonder if you were patient zero, the start of an infectious vector that would show up on Google News. I sneezed, yes, but I also sweat. I leaked vile fluids. I coughed from the pit of my intestines. My fingernails ached like an old man's bad knees. So that's a collection of pretty gross details about how bad the cold was that I had. But it builds up to what I, as the writer, consider to be more and more compelling details, or more and more maybe elaborate details. So that's an example of climactic arrangement. It can be really effective, especially in narrative writing. Spatial. So here what I've done is kind of write a description of a sort of, kind of a semi-fictionalized description of my son's elementary school cafeteria. And you see the first sentence just kind of gives you a general statement about the space, and then the successive sentences go from the far wall to the middle of the room to the near wall. So you can imagine that as I'm writing it, I'm standing there and I'm arranging the writing from far away from me to near. I could go from near to far, I could go left to right, top to bottom, whatever. But if you're using a spatial organization, the key is to be consistent so that you don't disorient your reader. They can see what it is you're writing. And then chronological. So this just is a paragraph I invented about presidents. So the first few presidents were part of the newly affluent generation from Massachusetts and Virginia. Andrew Jackson came along in the 1820s. He was from the frontier. Later presidents and candidates for many years after Jackson would adopt his strategy, and then in the 1970s, the strategy would reach its modern height in the person of Jimmy Carter. So what I'm trying to do there is use explicit transitions to show you that I'm moving through time. And I think if you're doing that for a reader, if you're using a chronologically arranged paragraph, you do need to build in those explicit transitions that say, first this happened, then this happened, then this happened, and then that happened. It's a really, as I said, a really intuitive way to arrange a paragraph. So here is the exercise. This is the exercise that you need to do in order to get credit for listening to and watching the mini lecture. This is a paragraph, and you'll notice the sentences are individually numbered for everyone's convenience. What I would like you to do is pause the video at this point, and I don't know if there's a way for you to cut and paste this paragraph. There probably isn't, because this is all together in a video. But what I would like you to do is to take a stab at rearranging this paragraph so that it makes more sense. As it is right now, it's unified, but it's not terribly cohesive. The sentences don't flow into one another very well. So it's kind of like putting together a jigsaw puzzle. But I want to see what you can do to rearrange this paragraph so that it is just organized better. Please, when you do that, go ahead and either write it directly into, I don't know. I'm going to put kind of an assignment Dropbox for this exercise on Canvas, and I think I'm probably going to set it up so that you can either upload a file, so if you want to do this, rearrange the sentences in Word, or if you want to just type it directly into the text entry field in Canvas, you can do either one of those. But please do that by Tuesday so that you will get credit for this mini lecture. And if you've got follow-up questions, please feel free to ask me in class on Tuesday. So I'll escape, and I will see you guys.